Does the United States have an immigration problem? You bet. In fact, the country is being torn apart over immigration. Donald Trump himself has vowed to deport millions of immigrants during his second term, and it's a large reason why he was elected. And not that he's asking, but if this is where we're heading, I have a really good place for him to start. In fact, I can make it so easy and cost-effective. Instead of deporting millions, let's just start with 2. UNFTR. In one of history's great ironies, 2 of the most influential voices shaping America's increasingly hostile immigration debate are themselves immigrants. Rupert Murdoch, the Australian-born media mogul, and Elon Musk, the South African-born tech billionaire, have wielded their platforms to dramatically influence how Americans think and talk about immigration, often stoking fears while conveniently overlooking their own immigrant origins. Murdoch's Fox News has spent decades fear-mongering about immigration, painting asylum seekers as invaders and promoting xenophobic conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement Theory. Even Fox News alums, such as Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, and Bill O'Reilly, continue to spew hateful rhetoric on independent platforms. Meanwhile, Musk, who acquired Twitter, now X, in a $44 billion takeover, has increasingly aligned himself with far-right anti-immigration voices. In fact, in January, just now, he wrote a column defending Germany's AfD party, known for its xenophobic positions and flirtation with neo-Nazi elements, claiming that they were being unfairly maligned for wanting to reduce immigration. But back to the U.S. You can't make this shit up. 2 immigrant billionaires have helped poison America's immigration discourse. I mean, how did we get here? Well, what if I told you it all started under a Democrat president? That's right. Musk and Murdoch's outsized influence stems from the dangerous consolidation of media power that accelerated with the Telecommunications Act of 1996, the year that everything changed in American media. In fact, we just did an episode on net neutrality, which was also a casualty of the Telecom 96 legislation. See, 1996 deserves its own chapter in the history of how we let billionaire immigrants pull up the ladder behind them while poisoning our national discourse. But before we get to that, we need to understand that media manipulation by the wealthy isn't new. It's just more efficiently packaged now. Okay, so let's dig into a bit of history to illustrate my point. Let's go all the way back to the battle between William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer at the end of the 20th century, which gave us the term yellow journalism, named after their fight over a comic strip featuring a kid in a yellow shirt. It's a cute origin story for a rather ugly practice. So these press barons' competition for readers led them to stoke war fever against Spain with manufactured stories about Cuba. Their sensationalism didn't just sell papers, it helped drag America into war and launched famously Theodore Roosevelt's political career via his Rough Riders mythology. And this practice continued all throughout the 20th century, by the way, where wealthy owners kept tight control of the narrative. For example, the New York Times buried stories about the Holocaust even though they had information about it. McCarthyism found cheerleaders on the editorial pages across the country. Vietnam got a free pass in its early years. I mean, I would argue that the golden age of journalism was very, very brief. A shining moment in the 1970s when the Pentagon Papers and Watergate showed what investigative reporting could do. For one brief, shining moment, speaking truth to power was also profitable, and that was the key. It was also during this period that the seeds of destruction were planted. One fateful night at the University of Chicago, a group of economists gathered together to debate Ronald Coe's 1960-something theory that the free market would always produce better outcomes than government regulation. Now stick with me here because this is an important moment in time. So all of these economists are gathering in a single house. There's like 20-something of them at U Chicago. And everybody was arguing against it. And then Milton Friedman, ever the true believer, spent hours wearing everybody down arguing its defense. And by the night's end, every economist in the room had converted to the cause. So this theorem, the Coe's theorem, would become the intellectual foundation for Reaganomics and specifically the justification for auctioning off federal broadcast spectrum to the highest bidder. Now fast forward to 1996 when everything went to hell in a handbasket, wrapped in a deregulatory ribbon. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, built on Coase's free market gospel, stripped away ownership restrictions that had protected media diversity since 1934. Also that year, America Online opened the internet floodgates to the masses. And another thing happened that year. Fox News launched its fair and balanced assault on reality. The results were staggering. Media companies swallowed each other whole like hungry hippos on steroids. Local newsrooms withered. Diversity of opinion became an endangered species. And into the breach stepped two immigrant billionaires who would reshape the American discourse in their own image. If you get a chance to check it out, there's a great Fry and Laurie sketch from 1994 imagining Rupert Murdoch in a parody of It's a Wonderful Life. So in it, they reveal the horror of the world that lives under his media empire and Ghost of Christmas Future, right? And in the end, he's also given a vision of the world where he never exists. And everyone gets along, everything's perfect and harmonious and beautiful. Now, Murdoch's takeaway, his lesson, his character's lesson in the sketch is that this beautiful, perfect world where everybody gets along is the perfect place to launch an evil media empire. 30 years later, and we are living that dystopian punchline. Rupert Murdoch's rise would be absolutely hilarious if it wasn't so tragic. Here's a fun one for you. Picture this. Young Rupert Murdoch at boarding school proudly displaying his prized possession, a bust of Vladimir Lenin. His father, Keith, was terrified, actually, that he might become a communist sympathizer. Oh, the irony. Instead of a communist, though, Junior grew up to be a neo-fascist oligarch. Talk about a Shakespearean plot twist. There were a number of pretty wealthy families in Australia, and the Murdochs were one of them, but they weren't the ones that everybody would have bet on at the time to become this global phenomenon. Now, by the time Rupert took over the business and had his eyes trained on getting into the United States, his entry into the market was actually pretty modest. In 1973, he purchased the San Antonio Express for pocket change by billionaire standards. But here's the genius part. Nobody really saw him coming. I mean, who would take an Australian newspaperman really that seriously? But that small Texas foothold turned out to be the thin edge of a very destructive wedge. So before unleashing his particular brand of toxic journalism on America, Murdoch had pretty much perfected his formula in the UK. His British tabloids did more than just peek through celebrity keyholes. They systematically stripped away any remaining dignity from public discourse. I mean, the man literally invented the modern British tabloid, transforming respectful coverage of the royal family and everything else into a blood sport. Now, say what you will about the royal family, but the treatment of them was more indicative of how the media was going to behave from that point forward. Fast forward a bit more, and you can probably draw a pretty straight line from Murdoch's entrance into the media landscape in the UK all the way to Brexit. Now, financially, it's all turned out pretty well for the family. By 2023, Murdoch's media empire had become a behemoth, with News Corp generating $9.9 billion in revenue and Fox Corporation adding another $14.9 to the family coffers. The Dow Jones unit, including the Wall Street Journal alone, produces $2.1 billion. So after selling most of his entertainment assets to Disney for a cool $71 billion, he kept his news properties because why give up your favorite tools for manipulating public opinion? Hey folks, quick break. If you dig what we do on UNFTR, have I got something for you. Go over to UNFTR.com and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In the newsletter, we highlight important news from progressive sources, include some original thoughts from our team, an economic chart of the week, and a weekly progressive spotlight. And did I mention it's free? Now, before you finish this video and go to UNFTR.com to sign up for our free weekly newsletter, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so that we can beat back the algorithm monster. And now back to the episode. So if Rupert Murdoch wrote the playbook for weaponizing media ownership, Elon Musk has updated it for the TikTok generation. Now, before we get to his $44 billion Twitter tantrum, let's talk about where this self-proclaimed free speech absolutist really comes from. Musk's origin story isn't exactly the rags to riches tale that he might have you believe. Born into the white elite apartheid-era South Africa, his family's wealth came partly from an emerald mine in Zambia, though good luck getting him to acknowledge that these days. According to a January 2024 biography by Walter Isaacson, Musk actually overstayed his visa when he first came to Canada and then engaged in unauthorized work in the United States while on a temporary visa, the exact kind of immigration violation his platform now regularly rails against and has gotten him into a little bit of heat with MAGA. Musk put his family's money on the line to start Zip2, which sold for a cool $22 million. And I can't take anything away from this. There are plenty of people who start on third base and get thrown out before ever making it to home base. So fair enough. And from there, Musk invested into X.com. That was an early payment gateway that ultimately became PayPal. Now, there's an interesting backstory to this that's symbolic of everything that he touches. Long story short, across the hall from one another, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel were building payment solutions, and they were both burning cash. Now, when they discovered one another, and to save their respective asses, they put the two companies together to form what is now PayPal. Peter Thiel, though, soon figured out that Musk was a cowboy, willing to not only burn other people's cash, but he was building the business on a pile of fraudulent transactions. Now, early shades of Machiavelli appeared in Peter Thiel as he jumped ship to let Musk flame out, only to orchestrate Musk's termination from behind the scenes and come back in just in time to negotiate a $180 million buyout to eBay. Now, the through line here is that Musk is bright and talented. Also, he's willing to burn anyone and everyone. He's willing to operate outside of the law if necessary, and is frequently bailed out by people smarter and bigger than him, including the U.S. government. According to SEC filings, Tesla and SpaceX together received approximately $4.9 billion in government subsidies, with SpaceX landing a juicy $1.6 billion NASA contract. Pretty good for a guy who claims to hate government intervention into business. Now, things have worked out pretty well for Elon Musk. Tesla, which he did not found or create, reached a peak valuation of over $1 trillion a couple years ago. Now, with Musk owning about 13% of Tesla and SpaceX valued at $180 billion as of early 2024, most reliable estimates put his net worth around $200 billion. Some outlets have even recently claimed that it's double that figure, which would make him the wealthiest person who ever lived. Now, we'll leave it to the billionaires to sort out their scorecard, but no matter how you calculate it, Musk's wealth represents a preposterous sum that has allowed him to influence presidential elections, take over the digital public square in X, and place himself at the center of every conversation from Silicon Valley to the Beltway. And while X hemorrhages advertisers faster than a Silicon Valley startup burns cash, Musk's wealth keeps growing, enough to buy several small countries if they were for sale on Amazon. Now, it should be noted that Elon's companies have faced multiple lawsuits over things like racist workplace conditions. After a jury awarded $137 million to a single plaintiff for racial discrimination at Tesla, which was later reduced to $15 million, Musk's response was to tell his employees to grow thicker skin. Meanwhile, his businesses have hoarded visas. Tesla and SpaceX together have sponsored thousands of foreign workers, something that now has him at odds with the MAGA extremists like Steve Bannon, leaving Musk temporarily in a bit of a bind. His companies need strong immigrant labor, but MAGA wants a zero-immigrant United States, and he's just now finding out what an angry MAGA base looks like. So grab some popcorn for this one. Now, the real joke here isn't just that two immigrant billionaires are pulling the ladder up behind them. It's how they've convinced millions of Americans to thank them for it. Today's media landscape is an oligarch's playground where 6 corporations control 90% of what Americans see, hear, and read. It's like a bad game of Monopoly where the billionaires start with all the properties and we're just all paying rent. As local newsrooms die faster than New Year's resolutions, these mega corporations fill the void with national outrage du jour. Remember when you cared about what happened in your town and your community? Now you're more likely to know more about a liquor store robbery 2,000 miles away because it fits somebody's narrative about crime in America. Meanwhile, your local government operates with all the oversight of a fox guarding the henhouse. These aren't just media companies anymore. These are reality-shaping machines. Murdoch's Fox News has perfected the art of turning white anxiety into ratings gold, while Musk's X serves as a megaphone for conspiracy theories and anti-immigrant rhetoric. The platform wars between traditional media and social media titans aren't about truth or free speech. It's about who gets to control the narrative. Like that time that Murdoch told us that climate change was no big deal because we could just stop building houses on the beach. Or when Musk decided that Germany's far-right AfD party just needed better PR. See, these aren't accidents or gaffes. These are calculated moves in a larger game to influence and control. And here's the thing, and why I told you the piece about the Chicago School and the Coase theorem. This is exactly what the architects of the Telecom Act of '96 wanted. When Ronald Coase and his Chicago School acolytes argued that the free market should regulate itself, they knew exactly what would happen. Concentration of media power wasn't a bug, it was the feature. And now we're stuck in a democracy death spiral where billionaires use their platforms to convince working people to vote against their own interests. It's like watching someone punch themselves in the face while a billionaire convinces them it's good for their complexion. The solution isn't about individual billionaires or even specific media outlets. It's about dismantling the system that allows a handful of wealthy immigrants, in this case, to dictate how America talks about immigration. Until we address the fundamental problem of media consolidation and billionaire influence, we'll keep getting played by people who climbed the ladder of opportunity and then set it on fire. So the next time you hear Murdoch's media empire or Musk's X platform railing against immigrants, remember, these are two immigrants who got theirs, and now they're slamming the golden door shut. It would be funny if it weren't destroying our democracy one tweet and one Fox News segment at a time. But the American dream has become the American scheme, and we're all just living in their simulation. Here endeth the lesson.